They say every masterpiece starts with a blank canvas, but nobody talks about how the world treats the artist holding the brush. His name was Malik Harris, a painter whose art looked like a story whispered between heaven and heartbreak. He had spent 3 months on that piece, a portrait of a young black boy standing before a storm, holding a mirror that reflected sunlight. The rain that day wasn't just falling, it was pounding. He stood there, soaked to the bone, clutching a painting wrapped in plastic that had already begun to tear. The edges curled like wounded skin. To Malik, it wasn't just art. It was a prayer, a message, a cry for visibility in a world that only saw color when it came with a label. That morning, he'd walked into the Wyneider National Museum, clutching the painting with trembling hands. The receptionist didn't even look up when he said, "Hi, I'm here for a submission review. The curator said I could." She cut him off. "Deliveries are through the back, sir." He smiled softly. "I'm not a delivery man." Her eyes finally met his, but only for a moment. Then came the tight-lipped smile, the kind that says, "You don't belong here." He was eventually led into the submission room. White walls, fluorescent lights, and faces that looked carved from the same pale marble as the statue surrounding them. 5 curators sat before him, each with that detached art world arrogance that only comes from never being ignored. He unwrapped his painting, his heart thumping. When the plastic fell away, the colors breathed life into the sterile room. Golds, browns, deep blues that told centuries of pain and pride. Silence, then a cough, then laughter. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, leaned back and said, "It's emotional, I suppose, but it feels a bit urban. Perhaps something you'd see at a community center." The woman next to him added, "Yes, it's bold, but not museum material. There's something a bit angry about it." Malik blinked. "Angry? Well," she continued, "the subject matter, the tone, it's confrontational. Not quite what our audience appreciates." Their words cut sharper than broken glass. They weren't rejecting his art. They were rejecting him. He smiled, trying to mask the sting. Art isn't supposed to comfort the comfortable. The silver-haired man smirked. "Perhaps, but in this institution, we curate timeless beauty, not political statements." They turned away before he could respond. He stood there for a moment, gripping his painting, as if letting go would mean losing himself too. Then he walked out. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. He stood on the museum's marble steps, watching water trace down his reflection in the glass doors. Inside those doors hung works by men who painted oceans they never swam and deserts they never walked, faces they never understood. And yet, somehow, they were called visionaries. Malik pressed his hand against the glass. "One day," he whispered, "you'll remember this face." He turned and began the long walk home, shoes soaked, pride bleeding, hope clinging to its last breath. That night, he laid the painting against the wall of his tiny studio apartment. The light from the street lamp outside fell across the boy in the painting, the one holding a mirror to the storm. For a moment, Malik could almost see the boy blink. A tear rolled down his painted cheek. Or maybe it was just the water dripping from Elijah's brush. He wasn't sure anymore. The next morning, Malik received an email. "Dear Mr. Malik Harris, thank you for your submission to the Wyneider National Museum. Unfortunately, your work does not align with our current exhibition themes. We wish you the best in your creative journey. Curatorial Board." He read it once, then twice, then deleted it. But that same week, as he scrolled through social media, he froze. The museum had just posted their new exhibition announcement, "The Faces of Struggle, a celebration of diversity in modern art." And there it was, his concept, almost identical composition. A black child standing before a storm. The only difference? The painter's name wasn't his. The caption read, "A stunning new acquisition by celebrated artist Daniel Forrester." A white artist. Malik's hands trembled as he stared at the post. Every brushstroke, every symbol, every hidden message in that painting. Stolen. His heart thundered in his chest. He knew that image wasn't a coincidence. It was theft. But who would believe him? They said my art was too angry. Maybe they were right. Because one day that anger will hang in their halls, and they'll pay for every drop of it. He was just the black artist they ignored. And for the first time that night, he picked up a knife, not to harm himself, but to cut the canvas. Half of it fell to the ground. The boy's reflection was gone. Only the storm remained. That night, Malik sat in his dimly lit studio, surrounded by the very paintings they rejected, pieces that carried his soul. A portrait of his grandmother's hands, the same hands that raised him when his parents were gone. A mural of children playing on cracked concrete streets, painted in gold and hope. Each one a prayer unanswered. His friend Tasha, an art curator from the local community center, found him there, staring at the letter like it was a death certificate. "Malik," she whispered, "you can't let them define you." He didn't look up. They already did. "Then paint anyway," she said. "Not for them, for you?" He laughed bitterly. "Paint for who? I can't even afford the rent on this studio." Malik stood, walked to the canvas, and with a burst of frustration, threw black paint across it. The paint dripped like tears, bleeding through the colors he had spent weeks perfecting. He whispered, "If they don't want my art, they can choke on my pain." Then something strange happened. The black streaks formed an unintentional pattern, chaotic, raw, and hauntingly beautiful. He stepped closer, eyes widening. It looked like chains breaking apart. In the weeks that followed, Malik stopped trying to please galleries. He started painting the truth. He painted police brutality, racial injustice, and poverty. He painted the dreams of children who'd never see Paris but could still imagine color. He posted one piece on social media with the caption, "This is what rejection looks like when you turn it into fire." It went viral overnight. Thousands of comments. People from all over the world saw themselves in his art. He wasn't just painting anymore. He was documenting the photo of Malik's painting, Chains of Silence, spread like wildfire. It wasn't just shared. It was felt across timelines, across oceans, across walls that had never before shown a black artist's name. News outlets called it raw, unapologetic, a mirror to America. Within a week, he had 1 million followers. Within a month, every art collector in New York wanted to represent him. "Mr. Harris, what inspired your latest piece? Do you consider yourself a political artist? How does it feel to be the voice of a generation?" Malik smiled politely in interviews, but inside, he was torn. He never painted to be famous. He painted because silence hurt. Tasha entered, holding her phone up. "You're trending again," she said, half smiling. #1. Malik sighed, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, funny how fame comes easier than justice." She studied him quietly. "You don't look happy." He looked at the painting before him. A massive canvas showing two hands reaching for each other but never touching. "They're calling me a hero," he murmured. But heroes don't get evicted notices or lose sleep wondering if they're selling their pain as entertainment. Tasha frowned. "You're not selling out, Malik. You're speaking out." He turned to her. There's a fine line between those two. Every artist faces a moment when the world stops listening to their truth and starts consuming their pain like content. A man named Elliot Crane, a wealthy art dealer, offered him a global exhibition. "The world needs to see your genius," Elliot said over the phone. "I'll take you international, London, Paris, Dubai." Malik hesitated. "And what's in it for you?" Elliot chuckled. "Just a fair commission." "You deserve the spotlight, Mr. Harris." Weeks later, the exhibition was a spectacle. Luxury cars, champagne glasses, critics whispering his name. Malik stood beside his painting Reclaimed Souls, the one inspired by his grandmother, when he noticed something. A wall plaque. It didn't say Malik Harris. It said, "Private collection of the Crownsley Museum, acquired in partnership with Elliot Crane." His chest tightened. He turned to Elliot, voice sharp. "What is this?" Elliot raised his hands casually. "Relax. It's good for you. Crownslay's name gives your work legitimacy." "Legitimacy?" Malik snapped. "They rejected me. Now they're profiting off me." "Welcome to the art world," Elliot said coolly. "Everyone's owned by someone." And that's when Malik realized the world didn't want his art. They wanted his story. his struggle, his skin. That night, he walked out of his own exhibition. The cameras followed him, flashes blinding, questions echoing. Malik, where are you going? To the museum buy your new pieces? Are the rumors true that you signed an exclusive deal? He didn't answer. He just walked through the city lights until he reached the river. He looked at the skyline's reflection in the water and whispered, "They see my art, but not me." He flipped open his sketchbook. Inside, a rough drawing of a burning museum. Underneath, he wrote in red ink, "Reparations." The next morning, Tasha stormed into his studio. "What did you do?" she shouted, holding her phone. "You posted it, didn't you?" Malik looked up, calm, defiant. "Yeah." Online, his sketch had gone viral again. Hashtags flooded the internet. Hashtag burn the museums. Hashtag reclaim the art. Hashtag Malik Harris speaks. People were calling for institutions to return art stolen from black artists. The movement exploded, but so did the backlash. Sponsors pulled out. Brand deals collapsed. Galleries blacklisted him overnight. For every truth spoken too loud, there's always a price. Days later, a letter arrived, hand-delivered, embossed with gold. The Crownsley Museum was suing him for defamation and emotional distress. Malik read the words slowly. His chest rose and fell, until finally he laughed. "They ignored me," he whispered. "Now they're scared of me." That night, he painted again. A massive piece. Dark, violent, alive. It showed a man chained to a museum wall, reaching toward a mirror where his reflection stood free. He titled it, "Exhibit A, the artist they tried to own." What they didn't know was that painting would become the centerpiece of their destruction. The video of Malik's painting, Exhibit A, the artist they tried to own, was everywhere. The raw emotion in it. The man chained to a museum wall, staring into a mirror that reflected freedom, struck deep. People were marching, tweeting, and writing essays. Some called Malik the new voice of truth. Others called him dangerous. But in the middle of all that noise, Malik stayed quiet. In his studio, alone, brush in hand, rage in his eyes. "Malik, this is insane," she said. "You're on CNDBB, even the guard." He didn't look up. "Good," he muttered. "Let them watch." She frowned. "You don't get it. They're painting you like an angry black artist who hates success." Malik turned, eyes blazing. "I don't hate success, Tasha. I hate theft. I hate watching people like me die poor while museums profit off our pain." Tasha's voice softened. "I know, but you need to be careful. They play dirty." He paused, then smiled bitterly. "So do I." Fame had made him visible. Now the truth would make him dangerous. Days later, Crownsley held a press conference. Rows of cameras. Perfect lighting. The museum director, Margaret Vaughn, stepped up to the podium, poised, confident, rehearsed. "Crownsley Museum has always championed diversity," she said smoothly. "We are deeply hurt by Mr. Harris's false claims." Her smile was PR perfect. "But let me be clear," she continued. "His painting exhibit A uses imagery and techniques nearly identical to works in our collection. We are investigating potential copyright violations." The audience gasped. Reporters shouted questions. Somewhere across town, Malik watched a live feed, expressionless. Then a smirk. Tasha stood behind him, nervous. "They're saying you copied them?" Malik chuckled darkly. "Copied?" He picked up an old sketchbook and flipped it open, revealing charcoal drawings dated years before his museum rejection. Among them, the same concept sketches Crownsley now claimed he'd stolen. He held them up to the light. "They didn't inspire me," he said quietly. "They stole from me." 2 days later, a former museum intern came forward, anonymously. She leaked emails, hundreds of them. Screenshots flooded social media. Curators from Crownsley had been exchanging Malik's old portfolio, his original submissions, the ones they rejected. They'd used his concepts, modified them, and displayed them as modern interpretations. The evidence was undeniable. Hashtag Crownstone Exposed trended worldwide. A shocking development tonight. Leaked documents reveal that several Crownstones exhibits were allegedly inspired by Malik Harris's earlier works. Public outrage continues to grow. Pay Malik. Pay Malik. Return the art. In one video clip, a reporter caught Margaret Vaughn being chased her car by angry protesters. She refused to comment. The museum's board suspended her within 48 hours. His hands were covered in paint, his eyes distant. He stared at Exhibit A, now half-finished, its reflection almost begging him to stop. Then came a knock. He opened the door and froze. Standing there was Elliot Crane. "Still painting fire, I see," Elliot said with that same smug smile. "Thought I'd check in on my investment." Malik's jaw clenched. "I'm not your investment." Elliot stepped closer. "Aren't you? Who do you think leaked those emails for you?" Malik blinked. "What?" Elliot smirked. "You think whistleblowers just appear out of nowhere?" "No, Malik. I wanted Crownsley to burn. They owed me money, and you were the perfect matchstick." Malik's voice dropped. "You used me?" "Use?" Elliot laughed softly. No. I partner with you. Now, thanks to me, your art is worth millions. You should thank me." Malik took a slow step forward. "You turned my fight into your revenge story." Elliot's grin faded. "This is business, Malik. Art is business." Malik's hands tightened into fists. "Then I quit your business." He slammed the door. He thought walking away would end the game. But the real war was just beginning. 2 weeks later, Malik woke to flashing lights outside his apartment. Police cars. Reporters. Chaos. He opened the door and froze. Officers stood in front of him. "Mr. Harris." One said, "We have a warrant to search your premises." "For what?" he demanded. "Forgery and stolen art," the officer replied. Tasha arrived moments later, shouting, "This is crazy. You can't." But they already found something. A crate sealed and stamped with the Crownsley Museum's logo. Inside, a stolen painting. Malik's face went pale. "That's not mine." The officer looked at him. "Then why is it here?" Someone had framed him. And suddenly, the hero became the headline again. Not for art, but for crime. Malik Harris. From artist to alleged thief. Was the Crownsley scandal set up all along? Art world in shock as rising star faces charges. He sat in the back of the police car, staring out the window, silent, and across town in a penthouse office. Elliot Crane watched the live broadcast, glass of whiskey in hand, smiling. Years later, the gallery was packed. Every wall shimmered beneath soft golden light. Every glass of champagne glistened like guilt in disguise. The National Museum of Modern Expression was hosting what they called a celebration of lost voices. Irony had never been so expensive, because on the centerpiece wall, the wall that once refused to carry his name, hung Malik Harris's painting, The Weight of Color. People stood before it, mesmerized. Critics whispered about its raw humanity, its pain, its genius. They didn't know the man who painted it once begged the same curator for a chance to display it, and was told, "It's too loud, too black, too political." Now that same museum had paid $6.3 million for the piece. Harris stood quietly at the back, a gray suit hanging loose on his frame, his once ink-stained hands trembling slightly. His beard had silvered, his eyes carried years, but not regret. Beside him stood Amina, his daughter, the one who had fought to recover his stolen work. The world thought he was dead. And maybe, in a way, he was. "You don't have to do this, Dad," she whispered. "They already paid. We won." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that had known too much silence. "Winning isn't about money, baby. It's about the truth." When the curator, the same one who had dismissed him years ago, walked to the podium, applause filled the hall. "Tonight," she began, "we honor the late visionary, Malik Harris." The room froze, because from the back, a voice echoed, "Late!" Heads turned, phones lifted, gasps rippled through the air like breaking glass. Malik stepped into the light, slowly, calmly, unmistakably alive. The curator's jaw dropped, the microphone squealed. Mr. Malik, I, we thought. You thought wrong, he said quietly, his voice carrying years of buried fire. You buried me when you took my name off that piece. You buried me when you said my art didn't fit your walls. He turned toward the crowd, his eyes wet but fierce. You didn't just steal my painting. You stole my voice, my dignity, and now you're auctioning his culture? The silence that followed was heavier than truth. Amina stepped forward, holding a small box, the old paintbrush her father had used the day he was rejected. The bristles were stiff, darkened with dried color. She placed it on the pedestal beneath his painting. This, she said into the mic, her voice trembling, was all my father had when the world ignored him, when he painted with tears instead of applause. The audience shifted, uneasy, guilty, moved. You celebrated his pain, she continued, but you never honored his humanity. Suddenly, a man in the crowd stood up. Victor Haynes, the collector who had bought the painting decades ago for $200 from a desperate Malik. I profited off you, Victor said, voice shaking. I sold your soul for fame. You can't undo the past, Malik replied, but you can stop pretending it didn't happen. He turned to the audience. Every artist you ignore, every dream you dismiss because it's not what you expect. You bury another voice like mine, and someday you'll pay millions to hear it again. A standing silence. Then one person began to clap. Then another. Then another. The curator was crying. Critics were writing, not reviewing. And for the first time, Malik Harris wasn't a name whispered in pity. It was a name spoken in reverence. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, cleansing. Amina helped her father into the car. You think they'll really change? She asked quietly. Ezekiel looked out the window at the glowing museum behind them. Maybe not, but at least now they can't say they didn't see me. He paused, voice barely above a whisper. And the next young artist won't have to bleed just to be believed. Months later, a letter arrived, handwritten, from the same curator. Mr. Malik, we're renaming the East Wing in your honor, not for your paintings, but for your courage. Attached was a check, not for millions, but for scholarships in his name. He smiled softly. Not all debts are paid in money. Some are paid in change.